Hi, John. We're on.
No way.
Yeah.
That happened. That happened slow.
I don't know. It only took about 10 minutes to get this all back going. 15 minutes, maybe.
So today I thought I'd venture into the problems with spiritual leadership in the church today.
Okay.
Or, as far as spiritual leadership goes.
Is this,
anywhere.
is this uniquely today versus some other time period?
Well, I say today in this world. I don't know about other countries always, but
Yeah.
can't be much different from what I'm talking about. And notes-wise, I have notes on it, such as the main points are leaders have lost their prophetic voice, positional authority without genuine character, maintenance over mission, isolation at the top, platform addiction, therapeutic drift. In other words, the pulpit becomes a counseling session rather than a neglect of the inner life. Those are the main topics of spiritual core problems of spiritual leadership. First one being they've lost their prophetic voice. Last night we were at a meeting with a bunch of the open to the Holy Spirit people.
Your little group.
That group that meets with Dennis and Alan and Dina and et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that is exciting about it is there's a prophetic voice. And that is, if there wasn't, that would be probably not a good meeting. It would be boring. But and when I listen to others talk about and say the same old thing week after week after week, and it's always on getting saved to the same old people that have got to get saved again because they've already been saved, but they got to get saved again because it becomes rote and it becomes boring. It loses spark. But with a prophetic voice group, you've got something you can hear from God and have a direction from God that you didn't have before.
Personalized.
And internalized for direction. Prophetic voice is foretelling, looking forward, and saying what's coming and what God is saying right now, even if you want to put it that way, because sometimes we need to hear from God rather than the Bible. I mean, we need the Rhema, which is the word from his mouth, but we also need the Logos, which is the Bible. That's the Logos. That's the word. That's the written word. But the Logos is one thing, but the Rhema is another thing. And Jesus did not say, man shall live by every word that comes out of the Bible. It said, we'll live by every word that comes out of the mouth of God. So that means we have to hear from him. And there's a lot of leaders that have lost their prophetic voice. And if you lost your prophetic voice and you wonder why you're only a few people, that's probably the main reason. That's what I say anyway. So, and that's just to point out the problem, but to also say that would probably be an indication that you're not connecting regularly with God either. You got to have some kind of, and that back to catching the vision too. I mean, sooner or later, you got to be expressing the big picture and what is it that you're doing in that big picture and why you're going that way. You have that gives you a little more purpose and reason. It gives you a little direction. And if you don't, I don't know. I don't really know how this works, but some people are bored to death in church. I do know how that works, and I do know why they're bored to death. but I don't know how anybody can settle for it. I would just not go. If I'm bored, I'm bored. It doesn't take much for me to be bored. I'm pretty easily bored in some ways, but I avoid boredom. So if that's going to be boring, or if I can see it's going to be boring, I turn left, exit stage left. So that's hard to deal with for some leaders. I think they don't, and they could be the reason why it's boring.
My just 2 cents on this is my experience is most people are in the rear, and the rear is boring. It is a maintenance game. Do you know what I mean by in the rear? It's like a military term. So there's people who are like deployed and forward and deployed. And even within that context, there's people who are in the front and who are in the rear. And the people who are in the rear, you have to go to the front in order to understand, I think, what you're talking about, and then 2, to distinguish between the two. I mean, that's how you understand a contrast. Loud because or quiet because you've heard loud. You have to have a contrast. And when you're on the front, in other words, you're at the leading edge of doing something. All the stuff that people do, think,
leading edge of doing something, yeah.
Yeah. You're all the stuff that people the kind of chain of action is very, very short. So the time span, you're always connected to what is actually happening. And it's very immediate. Then, in that experience, you'll then get the experience of reaching out to people who are not that close. And you very quickly realize that what occupies their thinking, their world, and everything that's related to it is so alien to what you're doing right now that you eventually realize that they're borderline useless. They're not helpful, and they're normally taking, and especially in the case of like in a military campaign. So my experience in Afghanistan, I remember before going over there, we went to all these intelligence agencies, and we talked to all these different teams. We're like, yeah, we're going forward. This is what we're doing. And they're all like super pumped. So we like exchanged emails and stuff like that. And then we go over there, and then eventually we realize, like, very quickly, within a month for sure, that all of those people we met were useless because what they were recipients of our work. So nothing that they can provide back there is of any use to you. I mean, certainly if they were to send you supplies or something like that, and even the supplies, maybe, unless they give you the specific things that you would ask for in a super timely fashion, which is difficult and costly. That's why it's difficult to run a military campaign. It's useless because it'll be the wrong things, the wrong timing, and it's just of no use. And by the time, even if you were to ask for it, by the time it were to get to you, it would no longer be of use. And so this is with all things in life, John. I consider like, for example, where like my living just out in and amongst like American society to be so far in the, and I try to explain this, right? So working at intelligence agencies in Washington, D.C., again, I said even people who are deployed, there's a front and then there's a rear. And the people in the rear, it's the same thing. So even in this same combat zone, like those people way over there are absolutely useless because you start calling them on the phone or you send them an email or something or you try to contact them and then they're going to start putting like road barriers. Like, well, I got to go seek I got to see if it's okay or this or we got to fill out a form or all this. And like, what is this? Like, what is this craziness? And the further you get away, the more that stuff has completely taken over. And that's all anybody knows. And the world that people live in, that's what they live in. That's how I see them. And you've mentioned to me what some people think about me. I could care less because I know that everything that occupies their concept of reality is in the rear. And I don't care because if you're in the rear, you're useless. all that apparatus in the military context is there to just write reports that like maybe eventually go to some decision maker. Then who cares? None of those people make any. All they make is like really big decisions, and what you eventually find out, this is the jadedness, the military jadedness, that the efforts that you do in particular aren't necessarily the things that make it there. It's just whatever narrative crap that they want to do anyways. So at the grand scheme, like right now we got like Iran going on, and whether or not there's like articles about like, how much missiles do they have? Do they have missiles? And all this kind of stuff. That's all just war nonsense and propaganda. I like really caution people to like probably read nothing on any of these military campaigns, because they are the least likely to know anything is what you're going to consume.
Yeah.
And so we're tying this back to it because I see it, right? So if I hang out here at my house, my little protected kingdom, and I hang out with my wife and my kids, I realize that they do not live in reality at all. They live in kind of like my cultivated little environment reality, but they don't live in reality. They have certain kinds of people.
In some ways, that's good.
It is good. That's intentional. The women and the children and the animals are way in the rear. And so now we're talking about having to lead that, because the context that you're talking about, especially the churches that you're talking about, they're catering to people who are in the rear. And so what do you have to do? You have to have good food. You have to like change it out. I mean, trust me, people in the front want good food, but they're going to eat any food. They don't care. Yep. You see what I'm saying? It's like that one thing alone, the level of difference of like, there's so much more cost to maintain the people in the rear as they go about doing their daily business. And that's what it is.
In the church, it's participating people. I used to call them peripheral people. They're out there, but they're not really participating in any way. So they're not really neither crucial nor helpful. That happens a lot. But one of the reasons why is because there's not a prophetic voice. And then the pastor, the leaders fall into maintenance over mission. They're not engaged in a mission. And so the general public just is willing to sit back and let them do it. Why, I'm not quite sure about that either, because I've never been able to sit back and watch them do. I mean, I do because I don't go there, but if I went there, I would go to the leadership and say, hey, you guys have to have a mission. You guys have to have a purpose. You guys got to...
Yeah, you got to be working towards something.
You got to be... right, exactly. You got to be busy. But if you're just maintaining the same old, you're, again, a spiritual leadership that is hurting the church and hurting people because you refuse to step out and move the people into mission. You're just maintaining. Maintenance is a serious problem here. I mean, just maintain, and it doesn't take long to go in a church and see whether they're maintaining. This doesn't take long. For me, it doesn't. I mean, I can go to one service and figure out where the maintenance is constant on the same old thing over and over and over and over. I'm about to visit another one and check it out. And it's just gonna. I hope they're not into maintenance.
I'll keep bringing up these metaphors. I feel like they're just going to keep coming until people really get this. So another metaphor would be like the hunters and gatherers, because I think hunting and gathering. I love how people see modern world. They see it just like differently. It's exactly the same, John.
Well, the consumers are gathering.
Here's the reality: is like how far the proverbial gatherers have now become. It's the entirety of society. The men are hunting. They're still hunters, and they're out there going and getting things. But then you have the gatherers. And so I think what you may not appreciate is that to lead gatherers is very different than leading hunters. And what you're kind of suggesting to some extent, and this is now taking a little bit further than maybe even what you're intending, is like trying to engage those gatherers so that they are acting more huntery. And it's probably a smart thing to do, because
I probably don't agree. The problem is that hunters and gatherers have to have a leader.
They do.
either one must have leading a certain leader. If they don't, they will fall into just hunting, just gathering.
Yes.
And that
I actually
becomes
completely agree with that.
That becomes again a paradigm or same old, and I'm like, I'm out.
Well, the reality is, and this is to finish off the previous metaphor, the people in the forward, they have to have the people in the rear. Otherwise, they're going to do stuff like start consuming the population, because they have to have supplies, and in order to run military campaigns, it requires a lot of material and bullets, band-aids, and food and stuff like that. And so they have to go and they have to get that stuff. And so they're going to get it one way or another. And so the way the U.S. runs their campaigns is they have amazingly unbelievable logistics chains. Well, in a hunter-gatherer type situation, the hunters cannot go out and hunt forever. They cannot. They think that they can, but they cannot.
Yeah, no.
And so they have to go and rearm. They have to re-equip. They have to, like, for example, like the building of the weapons and the stuff. That's the stuff that happens in the rear.
Yeah.
And so how to lead people in the rear is complicated. And I'll say for me, but I will just agree with kind of your overall point that you made there, that the leader.
No, leaders, not leader.
Well, no, I'm going to say the leader. There has to be a leader that is over both of those activities, because they serve a total purpose. And yes, you need sub leaders in each one of those that are focused on it. But to your point, you cannot do one at the exclusion of the other, because they serve each other.
Well, in my analogy, a leader has to have under leaders, if you want to call them. He may not be the quote unquote pastor or the leader of the group, spiritual leader of the group. But in order to be a real, true spiritual leader, you have got to have people that are engaged and making the whole thing go down the road toward that picture, toward that big picture. So, hunter gatherers kind of loses a lot of things over time, but leaders in Bible have the fivefold ministry leaders behind them, engaging and sharing and opening up and moving in faith. All that is a organism, like we talked about before. Instead of an organization, it's a living organism. And if that leader is hung up with stale and not a prophetic voice, not a forth-telling voice saying we're going here, and the others are engaging in that realm of what God is saying, then they fall into maintenance. Oh, we've got this much, let's just hold steady with this. And you made me think about hunters can't always be out there hunting. In that analogy, I agree. Unless you're in the Tazadeh tribe, they just go out and get a deer and bring it home. That's it. That's all they're going to do. So let's go get another one. Go hunt and get another deer. That's all they're going to do. Well, that's different. That's just different. That's providers. They're just providing for food. They're providing, but they're not really leading the group. And there may be a chief that doesn't go out hunting, and he's in charge. Well, maybe so, but generally not. I think
the so to finish off that metaphor, really what is happening in a hunter-gatherer situation, our hunters are going out into the external world to deal with the external world. That way that they can create a place where other kinds of activities can happen. So it's not just like, for example, like the hunters are also to some extent, maybe, I'm not trying to take this metaphor too far, but they're like the ones keeping other tribes at bay, like keeping them back. But in a larger context, like what is leading? Leading is going somewhere. Now, whether it's spiritually or physically or whatever, it is moving somewhere. I know a couple weeks ago we talked about achievement versus non-achievement. I'm trying to remember what terms you use there, but there's physical leadership and then spiritual leadership. Physical leadership being you're trying to achieve something, but your analogy, you're still trying to achieve something as well in a spiritual realm, but it's a little bit different of a concept, but you're still moving somewhere.
Yeah, that's why I preface this with spiritual leadership. The problem with spiritual leadership is different than physical leadership. Physical leadership is just each one has their position, whether it's military or whether it's in the church or whatever it is. Everybody has their place, their rank, their position, and they do it. That's physical. If someone come in and killed all the sergeants, you'd have to raise up a few sergeants. That's physical. But spiritual, like I wrote down here, that's a different story because they're not really developing people. What they put that there? They don't have genuine character, and they're not building character in the people. They're not doing that things that helps to build character and some kind of strength in them. I heard a message, and the guy is just preaching away, and everybody can hear him. But if you really paid attention, maybe you might get the hidden meaning. But because I don't know exactly his heart. But I said to myself, he just is interested in saying the words, interested in just getting it out there. But I've heard another preacher that really got down to the brass tacks and got into the people's stuff and said, you got stuff and that stuff stinks and that stuff is here, it needs help here and needs help there. He's getting into it and he's telling them what they need, and that proves that he's got character. If he doesn't have character, he's not going to he's not going to impart character. He's just not going to because he doesn't have it, not interested, which is hard to imagine he's even a leader. But leaders get into these positions somehow, or over time they lose it and then just maintain.
Well, my answer to that, and I don't say it's really John Maxwell's answer to that, is 21 Laws of Leadership. There's all these different attributes by which you can influence people. And there's some of them that definitely gear towards keeping the lights on. Like, here let me get that book.
No, I agree.
So I think it actually adds a lot to the specificness.
Which one is that one?
21 Laws of Leadership. It's kind of his main book, I'd say. I love this book. I probably am due to read it. So here's real quick. So you have the law of the lid, which just means that you can only lead the capability of people and in a direction or a project large enough that of your leadership level. That's all it means. So influence, process, navigation, addition, solid ground, respect, intuition. These are all different attributes, and not everyone has these. You have a couple strong ones, and then you have some medium ones, and then you have a bunch of weak ones. So magnetism, connection, inner circle, empowerment, picture, which picture is you look like a upstanding type person. So just by the look of what you look like, you look very respectable.
His presence,
So buy-in, victory, momentum, priorities, sacrifice, timing, growth, and legacy. So a couple of these, for example, process would be a good one right there. So if somebody is really high in process, the way they're leading people is mostly in a managerial context or a organization context, those kinds of things. But that person is not, for example, going to have, well, they could have any of these, but they may also, for example, have connection. So they connect with people and they're really strong at connecting with people, but that doesn't mean that they, have, for example, victory. That's mine.
Or he loves me a lot. I can tell he loves me, but he's not really going anywhere.
Yes.
That's not good. That's not good.
Yeah.
And that's probably true of the leader. The leader he's also not going anywhere. If he's not going anywhere, he may love the group and connect, but he's not leading them anywhere.
That's a good, and I would say what their role is in the church would be something like a shepherd, like a basic pastor who's going hey, I love you and you know that. And it's these are probably the right direction that we should go in. And so they would use their influence towards that, but that doesn't mean that they, for example, some of these in here are much more strategic than other ones. Influence or law of the lid, knowing that you have to, for example, grow leaders in your organization That is way more strategic. So there's a proverb. I was going to tell you this proverb in a completely different context. I thought about it the other day. Is Proverbs 6? No, not that one. Is it 12:9? He who hath a servant, he who is hated and hath a servant is better than he who honors himself and lacks bread. So in other words, that's like a very counter message to many idealist types out there, and I keep running into these types that think like it would be better to be poor and like virtuous than it would be to be hated and have security. Security being like wealth and stuff like that. And it's like your own book that you would quote tells you the exact opposite of that. And the reason why I bring that up is sometimes strategic leaders, they're not even, people may not even know who they are. Like that's one of the things, like I eventually realized, like, wait a minute, if I can influence, for example, specific people, you can start to move a group in a direction and not actually have to be like the front face and this and that kind of stuff. But the reality being that he who holds the strategic cards moves the group. And guess what? If no one holds the strategic cards, they're not going anywhere.
Right. And I was just thinking while you're talking that, I look at some leaders that are preaching to people, good messages.
Yes.
Right on the good stuff. Nothing bad about it. Some maybe not great exciting, but at least it's pointed and it's good food to eat. It's good stuff. But I hate to say this, but I heard it for 50 years, and I don't need to sit and hear another sermon on going after God and your bad situation. I mean, I understand that. We get a little bit waylaid, and the people that are willing to fall into this paradigm, and the pastor that's willing to just do maintenance on what he has, it's great. It's great. You got maintenance and you're maintaining a thing. You're managing the situation, but you're not going like this. Go that way.
No.
And let's go this way. And we're going to go that way. And so the people aren't challenged. The second thing is,
which is a requirement for growth, by the way.
Yeah. The second thing is in their messages is they educate instead of instigate. What I mean by that is, after you sit and listen to it 10 years, you kind of know what he's going to say. If he's on that topic, he's going to say this, he's going to say that. You're educated them, and sooner or later, but they're not engaged. They're not really doing anything, and so they're kind of like educated idiots. They're sitting there, I understand what he's saying, but so what? And so, again, if you're not telling the people who they are, you don't know who you are. I hate to say that, but someone said, why are you leaving church service? Even my wife asks me that sometimes. I go, because I heard it before. If he dropped dead, I could continue his sermon and do his 3 points and do the same thing he's doing, no problem, and you would miss nothing. That's arrogant. Probably you should call it confidence. It's one thing to be arrogant and I don't need you and I'm the best. I don't mean that. I'm just saying I read that book 17 times and now I know what it says and I know what chapter it is. And so we have to get to a point where we're enough with rote. We need the Spirit to come in and speak and minister to the people. We need the Holy Spirit more than the Logos. And they're very faithful to stay with the Logos, which is the Bible. But what about what the God is saying right now today? What about what he's saying this week? What about these general what do you call them? Not leadings, but you could call them leadings and nudges from God to go this way or someone to say that. What about that stuff that's spiritual?
John, I'm going to be straight with you. I know what the problem is, and I don't think you see what it is.
Good.
So I'm gonna help you out. Although
hopefully,
there's only, and maybe this even can help your group out. I'm thinking about it now. This probably would help, not just your group, but the larger group that's relevant. because your group is coming to a core point. I think the issue is the problem is everybody is on different parts of the journey. And what I've come to find, especially in an evangelical type church, they only cater to the first people in the door. And that show, that maintained show goes on forever. They hope that somebody new comes into that door, and then when they say that message that you've heard 500,000 times, they've heard it for the first time, or they need some basic food because they're out there starving. And the reality is that once you're stabilized, which is what that thing is, because you're going to think like they're doing it every Sunday at this time and this time. So dependability, because there's all sorts of people out there that have like wackadoo schedules, and they need something that is stable in their life. They go in there and it's predictable and it's easy. Once they're stabilized, they have to get out of there and into the next thing. And it isn't just now you're doing work for the church. No. You have to continue to grow in your kind of capabilities. So it's like, I wonder whether or not what would actually make sense is for you guys to create your own service, not at a different place, but at the church. Choose a time where you guys run your own service that gets the people in that church, and it will probably split part of the church up where people who, yes, they've been doing this for a long time, they can move on to the next advanced level, and guess what? It's going to open up the pews for other people to come in.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I don't know on what basis you say that. I'm trying to think about that, but I've thought about that a lot. First off, number one is you're talking about the fact that church continually does this thing in the land. That's true. It's very important for the church to keep doing what they're doing.
Yes.
I agree with that. That's dependability.
Yeah.
But that's not our problem, our group, the group that I go to. That's not the problem. Those people there have had enough of that. They got it down.
That's because
they've got it down. They got it down so down that they can say it without thinking.
They're at like level 10, or 50 or something. And the
Whatever
reality
level
is they need to be more involved at like the higher level of those activities. And I would probably say, like, if I were to think about, that church, maybe 40% of them are like juniors, so to say, and probably 40% are like intermediate to advanced, and then probably 20% are advanced. You guys are way in the advanced camp, and
that could be possible.
I know it's possible, John.
I know, but wait a minute. That's not the point. The point is
every message. Let me finish my point. Every message for any person, like right now, I'm talking to you. This message, this message I'm telling you is for you, and it is not for my 10-year-old child.
Well,
but that's the problem. Every message that every church is doing is for everyone. And so who do they cater to? The bottom. That's how it works every time. When you have a message is for an audience.
Yeah.
The audience has to be for that thing. And the more that they're all just grouped together,
and they need it.
Yes, they do need it.
And I agree with that.
You need to put people who need those messages there. The reality is I think what they would come back and say is, well, we don't know who needs it at any given time. It's like, yes, you do. Like you just want to cop out and not have to do the work of creating an organization. By the way, John, I'm actually arguing for a much better, stronger corporate structure than I am just necessarily the spiritualness. Because the reality is they don't need a bunch of, my opinion. This is totally my opinion now. I don't think that they need a bunch of people who just showed up for the first time ever with their kids or whatever, need advanced spiritualness. Very skeptical of that.
Well, here's the difference, my friend. Here's the difference. You see, if we name the name of Christ, we depart from lawlessness. That's the Bible. He that nameth the name of Christ departs from iniquity. Iniquity is lawlessness. If we name the name of Christ, we depart from, everybody does what's right in their own eyes. We depart from that lawlessness. We connect to say we agree with the rule of law in a sense. Law is needed. rules are needed, segments are needed. All that stuff is needful. That's why when a pastor hears some of the things I've said, he feels threatened and he feels like, well, what are you saying? I'm just doing this, so there's no real need for me. No, there's great need for you, and you're doing great. I encourage him to keep on going on. And I do encourage the pastor to keep going, and some of the leaders. I encourage them to keep on keeping on. The difference with you talking about this advanced group that want the things of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit can move in such a way with the group that it can even deal with the very lowest and the very youngest at the same time as the very oldest and the most experienced. Because he has, like, I've been in churches where the kids were leading the worship and doing the messages and talking about what God is saying. I've seen that with my own eyes, and I went, wow, that's awesome. Because
Yeah, I could see that.
because you can't find it. You can't just go get. Where's that church? I don't know. I'm not saying like
Yes, because most people seem to think that like children are completely useless, and it's like
seen and not heard. They should be seen and not heard.
If you're building them up from day one, like yes, they're a perfect example. I mean, this really should nail it on the head. I mean, I can only describe it because I can't show you in real time. But before we turn this on, I had to convert this sitting studio from a music recording studio. And yesterday, Julia, who is just turned 11 in March, we're recording I'll Fly Away, and the way our band plays it is we play it in double time. And so double time is like fast. And I have a lot of experience with double time. I've been trying to play double time with other human beings since I was 16 years old, and I know very well the pitfalls of playing double time. Double time is you play the same thing that you'd be playing for the same amount of time. So if it's a 2-minute song, it's still going to be 2 minutes. But everything that you do 2 times as much of.
Quicker, yeah.
So instead of like the beat being bun ta bun ta, it goes bun ta bun ta bun ta bun ta, and when it goes so fast like that, you can lose that time can start to blend around a little bit. So if you have like a metronome keeping your time, all of a sudden, it's just a weird phenomena. Your high notes, which should be second to your low notes, they start to fall onto the downbeat. And it just, something about it just sounds wrong or whatever. So we spent time here in the studio, like getting it right. I'll be darned if I didn't watch that 11-year-old on the guitar play double time, where she's basically playing a bass note and high notes with no problem. I have seen grown adults have very difficult time doing this, and I watched her do it. Why did she do it? Because she's been playing guitar for 2 years. And during that time period, not just me, but in her own other things, they've had to get her playing like very quickly. So she has experience going on guitar.
Yeah.
And so at 11 years old, we hit it perfectly in the studio.
Well, it might make you feel good that I can tell you that going double time on the ukulele, which I play, is difficult.
Yes.
For me, it's difficult. It's let alone just one time is difficult. I'm trying to get my fingers to go, I don't want, my fingers are telling me, no, I don't want to. And you go, yes, I'm forcing them.
Yes. So yes, you have to go slow and like start to really speed up. But the whole core point to this is like people, if there is any entity that people value is children, especially once they get 8+. The reality is no one is spending the time to build the incremental blocks to get them to where they're supposed to be. Dude, it's crazy. I mean, I know this in music because by the time I was 18, I had started playing at 14, and I knew at like 15 that was way too late to start learning music is at like 15 years old. I was like, I wish my parents would have forced me at like 7 or 8 because you gain all this stuff and, your fingers start to adapt and your muscle memory and all this kind of stuff. So like my kids, they're not musical, to be perfectly honest. And it can be a little annoying because I have to control them like little automatons. I don't want that. I just want like amazingness to happen. That's not how it works, right? And especially at that age, that's not what their skills are. Their skills are repeat. Do exactly what you're told to do. So anyways, by the time I was 18 years old, a band had come out called Avenged Sevenfold. This is a metal band, and they're like first main CD came out, and dude, it was like a hit. Anybody who knew metal knew about this band, and you listen to them, and like, so amazing. I didn't find out till a year or two later that they were 16 when they put that CD out, which is so mind-blowing, because by that point I had been playing in a band and guitar for 4 years. I was so far away from the level of skill of those people.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show you, they had been doing music before that point. And by the time they were 16, they were like world famous and unbelievably good at guitar.
Yeah, have you ever heard Nashville Cat? Nashville Cat says these guys get gigs at 2 years old. That's part of the song. They get gigs at 2.
Sure.
By the time they're 2. It's just kidding, but they start so early.
Yeah, exactly.
That by the time they're 16, they're super experienced.
World class.
Yeah.
The point, driving home your point, though, is that, like, yeah, there's no doubt about it that I have no doubts that a child could go run a very compelling message at a church. No doubts in my mind.
Yeah, in fact, it would probably be void of some other extra crap that we carry as well.
Absolutely.
And it will come across more innocently and more purely.
Yes.
And I think that would be great, but we won't hear it.
Yeah, I agree. I could see. Well, we're
not going to hear it.
It's. I don't. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Just
because nobody's doing it.
I see.
Nobody's doing that.
And I think to that point, though,
what church is doing it? Tell me.
I've never heard of it. Never heard of it. Never heard of it.
It's not. So, but I heard of it, and it's in Kansas City, and that's the only church that I saw that they did that with the kids.
Yeah.
And I went, wow, this guy's got a hold of something.
Well, they say so, John.
I mean, I was fortunate to hear it, but it's very rare.
Hopefully I'm not kicking people while they're down. But, John, they would say that they do it because they'll put on little pageants from time to time, and then they have kids. Of course, I don't mean that, because having seen these things, they're grouping kids with no message capability with kids who probably do have a message capability, and it just waters it down and just snuffs it out.
Yeah, I think sometimes I think some people think that you got to get all your ducks in a row in order to pull off church the way you want to pull off church.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm saying, basically, if you get a bunch of ragtag people that don't know what the heck they're doing, and they're a little bit nervous, and they're a little bit fearful, and you allow the Spirit of God to move in them and through them, it doesn't matter what their level is. The Spirit can do some wonderful things. And really, when the Spirit's moving, He's really for the benefit of the people. He's not. I haven't been in a service where the Holy Spirit led just for lead's sake, or just for the fact that they were in charge. The Holy Spirit was in charge. It's not that. The Holy Spirit moves in such a way for the comfort, healing, blessing of the people. And so, in the end, people are going to walk away from that. Last night we walked away from a meeting that was full of worship. Everybody was blessed. Everybody was appreciate what God was doing. It was all good for everybody. That's what I'm talking about. Get it all my ducks in a row. Nobody had their ducks. Nobody was in charge.
So let me amend what I was saying, because I'm totally convinced by your argument, but I still stand by the fact that the activities that you do for people who just show up at the door have to be different than what you do for the congregation, the whole congregation. I understand what you're saying. You're saying whether new or whatever, the congregation needs to have that experience. And I actually do agree. They need to be able, for example, to have church talk where, hey, we're now going to talk about the bad thing that happened here. But we're not doing this in front of people who it's like, this is like, they're about to kill themselves and they just needed to come to church just the one time so that they could get the... That's not the time for them to show up to have the. So it's like the difference between an internal meeting and just like a public thing. And when somebody who is day one shows up, they need the public spectacle. And there's nothing wrong with that. And because, John, they are there to get, period. They are not there. They have nothing to give. Nothing.
That's right.
You see what I'm saying?
That's true. I would say a lot of people come to get, and they need to get because they don't have anything to give. And that's a shame. That's too bad. They should have something to give. They haven't been taught properly what they do have and how they can utilize it.
Yeah.
Because there's the Bible scriptures in Ephesians that talks about by that which every joint supply. There is a supply of the Holy Spirit for each and every one, for each and every one. And that happens no matter what ragtag of group you got, of people you got. But the people aren't taught that about who they are in Christ or who they are in God, and that God will bring things in for one another. The Lord spoke to me years ago. I wanted to share something. I didn't know if it was any good and everything. How am I going to get a word? How am I going to share something? And the Lord spoke to me and says, if you have love for the people, you will have something to share.
Yeah, I believe
And
that.
I went, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because if you have love and a care for others, you will have something to share that's good. But if you don't care about others and you aren't interested in others and others' benefit, well, then you're not going to have so much. And there are people that go to church that aren't interested in other people's benefit. They're interested in their own. And I say, it's okay, let them in there. They'll hear the gospel, they'll hear the truth. But they won't have anything to share or give. They want to get in here, but get out. That happens all the time. I'm not picking on any particular church. I'm just saying that happens all the time.
Man, this really, the more I think about this,
Well, don't think.
I'm trying to integrate all this together. And when I think about this really goes to show you that churches, certainly if you're at a certain size, I don't know if it really matters. This is as important, but once you get beyond like the tiny size, you really got to have some pretty smart and strategic types that are running that church. Because I'm like going like,
Yeah.
Well, the reality is what you're bringing up, because I've seen this before, is like the being empowered as part of a group to go in and provide things, because people of all types will come and they have something to contribute, especially that could be very profound, but it has to go through some committee or some approval process and this kind of stuff. And the reality is in many cases, I think these places probably want people to come. For one, they know that there's like this load that they have to carry. And so the idea that anybody's going to attempt to carry it, they will give you much and more. But what they want to give you is the current things that they have, not new things. You know what I mean? They don't want like the idea of even new coming in to people who are drowning. They want control over the things that they already have. That's why they're spend all their time on it, because it requires so much. So they think that, well, if we get more people just doing these things and isolate them, failing to realize that once you start parceling up pieces and putting people in there, you now have management overhead that has to happen in order to arrive at this. Well, we get what we already have, and it requires a lot less of me and other people. But then you don't get any of those other things, and you would actually further cement that that's never going to be the case.
I think
You would have to all this time.
I hear what you're saying.
The people who run the church, they really have to be distant from the running of this kind of stuff, so they could start to allow. And by allow, they have no reason to reject these things and can integrate them.
Well, let me just say this about that. I agree with that, and that's a need. That's a real need when it gets to be past a certain size.
It's past a certain size.
And a greater depth of need and a greater depth of people.
You're managing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you're going to have your acts together to some degree. But I'll tell you, there are people I know, and I've come to this conclusion in myself. They're not as active physically, but because they're engaged spiritually in a way that you can't see, they are causing things to happen that they're not even. It's like that guy's really working hard, and he's going to get that whole job done out there that he's working in the yard, because you can see him moving and actually do. But there are people that guy's doing nothing, and yet without him, this stuff that we see happening, it's almost like physics.
Yeah, dude, it is what this book talks about.
Yeah, it's physics. Yeah. It's the thing that says there are people that are resting in a rocking chair and getting more done than you are physically doing physical stuff over and over and over again. So we need both. We need both. I'm not saying we don't need both, but we do need those that are resting in God, because it talks about that in Hebrews 3 and 4, that you have to enter into his rest. And I know men that have talked about this, Graham Cook being one of them. He was sharing how since he quit working for the ministry or for God or for church, he's never been so busy in all his life, and he never has to seek engagement or find something to do to make money or to do anything. He said, I've entered into his rest and look for him to supply and to take care of the next steps and the things that have to happen. However, he's an educated man that's come through a lot of things to be in that place.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you have to come to a place where you go, I'm not going to do anything. I am engaged, but I'm engaged spiritually and internally. I'm not engaged physically. And there's a lot of people that rush about and hurry to do stuff. I'm glad for them. Let them rush about and do stuff. But there are those also that sit back and go, and they know that they're causing something to happen that no one else can cause and no one else can do. And that's, excuse me, I get the hiccups. That is extremely important. And there are people that go to church and don't want to be challenged. But I know, I don't want to. I don't want to go there because I don't want to be challenged.
I don't know if anyone actually wants to be challenged.
Right, right, and so naturally speaking, they don't want that. But also, they don't want to be challenged, so they don't go, and they get upset if they're challenged, and they say, "Well, who says that we need that you're saying that you're challenging me on?" Well, I'm telling you that you need it because the challenge is to grow.
Yeah, everybody needs to be challenged. They don't necessarily want to be challenged.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And on that note, I regress.
Comments? People want to put their comments on? I was kind of monitoring here. I didn't get any comments. I did send a comment out to try to get people to comment.
Oh yeah, don't
comment.
No comments.
Yeah, no comments.
We're tired of it. You yell at us, scream at us, and it doesn't mean a thing.
I guess
facetiously.
Guess we'll see everybody next week, Saturday, same time, 8 a.m.
Thank you, by His grace.